Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is your favorite warlock practicing necromancer. And tonight I kind of want to do this as a personalized video because I know and I have seen a lot of videos and a lot of posts documenting violations of religious equality. Not just that, but rights because of their, how should I say this, their religious preferences. Basically, you see people in corporations violating their employees' rights. It's not just for employees, it is also for civilians. And it goes along a wide range of things from government down to medical, down to career, even down into having a family. Okay. The people get a hair across their ass and they violate your First Amendment rights to practice your religion either as a group or an individual based, you know, protected based religious, you know, practice. So I thought I would take a moment and kind of break down some things, speak from personalized experiences, but also kind of give you some things that I've witnessed, things that people have talked to me about in the past, and most importantly, things that have come down in people's lives. So here it is. Years ago, I had this friend that I was friends with back when I was a practicing Satanist. It was back before I turned um, to necromancy full time. And she was a good sister, a very hardcore, dedicated Satanist. She was a theistic and spiritual Satanist. Very loyal, very well knowledge. You know, she had a lot of knowledge, and but she had medical issues. And the problem was that she was not receiving adequate care because she was in the Bible Belt, or what is classified as the Bible Belt here in America. And for those of you that don't know about the Bible Belt, it stretches from Texas over to Florida up to Virginia, Maryland area, and Tennessee. Anything in that area, which was classified back in World War II, back in the Civil War days, was considered to be the Confederate States or the Confederacy. And yes, this same thought form is still around today, where Christ and the church is superior. And if you're not a Christian, then you're not eligible for the same privileges as they are. Because of the fact that she did not receive adequate care, she did not get the same medical um, standards. She was found dead in her home in Virginia. And an autopsy showed that she had had a stroke. She basically had a, not, I wouldn't call it a stroke, it was more of an aneurysm where a the vein in her brain burst and she bled out. So she basically died on the couch alone because she did not have was not given the proper medical tools needed, you know, through programs and stuff that, you know, you would normally see as being equally, you know, committed to. Also, you notice in certain aspects, like say Red River County in Texas. Like I said, I'm going to be speaking on personalized accounts as well. You have what is called the Good Old Boys group down there, and keep in mind that this is basically a desert community where most businesses have just basically taken a hiatus from and have left. Because it's basically run by Christians, and the council there is like top notch. We're in charge, and if you're not with us, then fuck you, get the fuck out. You're not gonna be around. The whole 4 to 6, 7 months that I was down there, I heard so many fucking stories. People would approach me in the grocery store, and they would say that people have disappeared, you know, or they've been arrested on bogus charges and made to disappear. They'd gone to prison for shit that they didn't do. I've had people tell me that, stories of just bogus stuff. I mean, horrifying things that you wouldn't see outside of the 18th century. Like hangings and burnings. Things that you know people have threatened to burn down the house that I lived in. The Catholic Church actually bought the place after I had moved out. Only for the minister, the bishop, to be removed and moved to this tail end church, this hick town that's like maybe 5 miles long down in southern Texas. I think it was about 5 miles from the border. And I mean, I heard so many stories when I lived there. People thought I was going to open up a satanic church. People thought I was going to corrupt the children. All these fucking bogus things. And I mean, you had, what was it, like 3 counties that uprose against me and the people that I was living with at the time, who were neo pagans, who actually, my friend's husband, he actually had roots there. His family was there. His brother was married to another woman who was a pagan at the time. She was into paganism. So, and I mean, all this came down, and it was like, they took out restraining orders, and so you couldn't find work. You go into the grocery store, and they jack up the prices on you, and I mean, it was like fucking bogus shit, man. I'm telling you. Excuse me. Oh man. So there was, I've heard of religious discrimination, my whole life, and like I said, I've heard stories, but until you experience it firsthand, you really don't grasp the the full extent of it. And then you realize that having the knowledge to defend yourself and to stick up for your liberties and your rights is something that you really have to do for yourself. No one else is going to do it for you. And that becomes a problem. It's like education today. The last few years, when we've had teacher parent meetings, you'd get the report cards, saying that, you'd see the papers, your child is getting everything correct, or they'd get a couple of things wrong, so they'd get like a 98 out of 100 on their work. They're getting basically what they classify as one, twos and threes, which is basically three being A's, twos being B's. So it's passing fucking grades, right? So whereas in the past, like in my day, it was A, B, C's, and D's, or F's for that matter, right? And that was back in the '90s. So you see how far things have gone downhill since the 1990s, in just 20 years, 20, 25 years. And it's interesting to see how they teach adding and subtracting between kindergarten and first grade. By the time they get into second grade, they're teaching algebra. And you're like, okay, what happened to division? What happened to multiplication? What happened to fractions? Long before you get into algebra, so they're not really teaching the faculty how to do the work, but they're also not teaching the children what they need to know to survive in the world and make money. You know, look at Thomas Eddington for an example here, and I think this is, I'm gonna talk a little bit about Thomas Eddington and Albert Einstein at this point, and you'll see where this plays into your religion and your practices and your legal rights. Thomas Eddington created the electric light bulb. He created the photograph, and he created, a couple of good things throughout his life as an inventor, but his teachers saw him as lazy. Not adequate. Whereas Albert Einstein just didn't connect with what they were teaching, within Germany. He was seen as being lazy, disassociated. But you look at where these guys went on to become. You know, Edison became a great inventor. Albert Einstein created the A bomb. Went down in history as a prime inventor as himself. You know, so when I teach my apprentices, I always look at what excites them, where their magic is taking them, where their practices are going. I look at what they're coming to me with, which is why I have them write things down. Just like my elders would have me keep a journal, like a dream journal, a ritual journal, personal thoughts journal, a grimoire even, a record of your journey. It shows your growth, right? Well, here it is. You look at today's schools. They don't teach you how to make money, but they teach you to be employees. Learn great to get a good job. You know what I'm saying? Why would you want to get a job when you can become, you know, a creator? You know what I'm saying? So when I look at my son for an example, I look at the hardships of his 8 years. The first year and a half after he was born, we had to deal with CPS, which is Child Protective Services. Number one, we were dealing with my son's mother's family. Okay, her mother is a zealot, a Baptist zealot who thought she was superior. She controls the entire family, like a mafia kingpin, if you will. So she attacked her own daughter, you know. It started out after my son was born. You get, a CPS worker that comes in just to interview, because if a woman comes out of childbirth, normally they would be right there to nurse their infant child and stuff like that. But what if they have an iron deficiency? What if they lost a lot of fucking blood and they had to spend about 3.5 hours patching her up from the inside out? How much blood did she lose during childbirth? Not mentioning dealing with all the sutures from the inside out. The fact that she lost a lot of iron during this process and throughout the pregnancy. Was that even a consideration? No. The hospital faculty saw a woman lying in bed that was sleeping a lot, not even holding the child for the first 2 days. So a CPS worker was called in. Everything was cool. They interviewed her, they interviewed me, done, over with. Next thing we know, we get a home visit, okay, from the head of the local branch of CPS wanting to do follow up things because there was concerning complexities or inconsistencies, supposedly. Okay. So we got all this situated. And then her mother comes in, wants her to quit her job as a CNA at a assisted living facility. Leave her friends, okay? To leave her friends to move down to West Virginia. To leave her child's father, who not only opened up his door and brought her into his home, spent I don't know how many nights getting up so she could sleep, okay, and rest after pulling 12-hour shifts or 16-hour shifts. Wow, okay. To move to what I refer to as a virgin nun camp down in West Virginia where she knows nobody. She has no job lined up. She had no friends down there, no support system. Why would you give all this up to move down there? All because the person that she was involved with was not a Christian. And that's what it came down to. When that wasn't enough, I was at work one night until about 9:30 because that time I was working for Tractor Supply and I was a closer. So I got a text from her saying that she accidentally bumped his head about a month into him being in this world. He had a little surface abrasion right about in here. Okay. Now, for those of you who don't know, an infant's head is basically like a sponge. It's very soft up on top. It doesn't cause any brain damage. It doesn't cause anything. It's just it doesn't even fracture the skull because the skull is kind of moves. It's when they get older that it hardens up, and that is like you and I, where if we get a concussion, that's a fractured skull. Okay. So, anyways, her mother comes in to her apartment, and this is before she moved in with me, and took a photo of our son's head. Held on to it, I might add, for about a month. Okay. And she uses her position because she sits on multiple boards from pediatrics to DHS to other types of councils where she is a counselor. Okay, so she used her personal influence to bring in CPS again. So basically, she had forced my son to go through a full metallurgical scan uh, in a CAT scan at only a month old. A month old. Okay, where she literally held him in place, from what I am told by my son's mother. Okay, who at the time was a practicing Baptist. So by the time we ended up getting to me being a Satanist, I became the focal point at that time, where all her friends told her to not allow me to have his social security number, not to get his social security card, his birth certificate, the whole kit and caboodle. Okay? And it turns out it was traced right back to her mother. Wow. Okay? All because in the CPS room where we had a meeting, she attacked her mother, her own daughter, while I was rocking my son on the table. Okay? Now picture this for a minute. You had the head of CPS, you had the actual caseworker, you had the head of the nursing, you had the head of the pediatrics department, and then you had her mother, all badgering my son's mother. Now, the ironic part is her mother stood up and was running her mouth, saying, this is her fears. This is what her life is like. This is what is going on. Yada, yada, yada. Until I pointed out one key piece of information. She sat down with her hands in her lap, just like this, looking down and did not say a fucking word. Not 2 minutes after we left, she turned the photo of my son's head over to CPS. So now it became child abuse accusations. So we spent a year and a half dealing with this aspect, jumping through hoops, and to the point where my son's mother looked at me and said, I can't do this anymore. Deal with it. So I did. I collected the evidence to the point where I had the entire division from Augusta, Maine to Bangor, Maine on both state and federal charges. 6 counts. Basically, I twisted their arms so fucking much that they either backed the fuck off or every single one of them were going to prison and losing their licenses to practice. And that included her father, who worked for Governor LePage at the time. Okay. And her mother would have lost her license to practice counseling and in the medical field. Wow. Yeah. When I have enough, I don't fuck around when you attack my family. I will give you leniency to a time, but when my son's mother is begging me to deal with things, you better fucking run, because I will not show you any mercy. So that was just 2 counts of what I had to deal with. Now, she ended up cheating on me 3 times after that point over the next 6 years. But still, there were still some good times, even though there was a few bad times. I don't hate her. I want to make that perfectly clear. I don't hate her. I just disapprove of the things that she's done wrong. If you're going to be with somebody, then you don't cheat on them. You're loyal. Especially those who have literally stepped up to the plate and been there through the good, the bad, and the ugly, and continuously be there. And yet, you still fuck them over. But still, you see what I'm saying. So anyways, like I said, and as of, I believe it was last year, the state of Louisiana passed a law stating that the only religious text that could be taught in school was the Christian Bible. Wow. That's Neoponic law for you. Yeah. You got to remember that Nevada and Louisiana are Neopolic counties. They're Napoleonic legal systems, whereas the rest of the country is civil. Okay? So, even in the corporate ladder, you see where in most businesses, especially fast food, you're going to see women at the top. And they've got this, now you got sexism involved, and very few males at the top in their respective fields. And the rest of us have to fight tooth and nail to get anything done, or to be anywhere, to become something. And a lot of these people are Christian based. And I've talked a little bit about this in the past, things that I had to do at Dunkin'. And it wasn't just Dunkin', it was also a Tractor Supply, where I had an AGM who became a new AGM at Tractor Supply, and he came in and told me I had to remove my rings or I couldn't work there. Well, number one, that's a violation of the 14th Amendment. Okay. Number two, that's criminal threatening. Okay. But instead, I chose to go to HR, which, by the way, is not your friend if that's a route you want to take. That is a possible route that you can take, but because it creates a paper trail stating that you did report this to HR. But you got to remember that HR's duty is not to the employee, it is to the company. Plain and simple. So I looked at him and I said, if I have to remove my rings, you're going to remove yours as well. And he said, no, I don't have to. This is a wedding ring. And I said, a wedding band is associated with Christianity. And therefore, by having me as a practicing Satanist remove my rings, you are in violation of the equal rights practices. The only way a company can legally have you remove things like this or like these, like this here, is by the Ramsey Law. And the Ramsey Law basically is for personalized safety. So if you're working with a conveyor belt, obviously you don't want anything that's going to harm you physically or take your life or cripple you. Like I said, a conveyor belt, this can get caught in it. Loose clothing can get caught in it. If you're in, say for an example, fast food and you're in the food industry, if you have rings that have gems and stuff like that that can fall out, that becomes a personal safety. It becomes a food hazard. So it basically becomes a way for a company to look out for their customers and their employees in that way. But outside of that, they have to go with the religious laws, both federal, state, and local borough laws. And this can vary, but they have to go by the First Amendment. And what is the First Amendment outside of the freedom of speech? The First Amendment literally dictates that your religion is protected if it has doctrine, a following, and or a place to worship. It does not matter if it is a church, a temple, a coven. Okay? Your religious practices are protected. And so even if you get under religious land use and personalized religious acts, your rights are protected because it clearly states that no individual, sect, assembly, or organization has a right to deny or limit your religious practices. And what's also good for you as an employee is the 1964 Civil Rights Act, titles VI and VII, okay, which protects you, which allows the individual to be protected from corporations, which will hinder you as a religious practitioner. It doesn't matter what type of religion. So for a court to go in and go, hey, guess what? In our school district, only Christianity can be, you know, allowed into our schools. Fuck you. You're in violation of our First Amendment rights. Wow. Not mentioning our civil rights and so forth. So let me just kind of read down here a little bit here. I wrote some stuff down that I also put down in the description box as well. I actually put this in the description box for you. But the 14th Amendment, you have what is called the Due Process Clause and the Dormant Privileges or Immunities Clause. Now, the due process, and I'm going to do this from a Google search, by the way. The Due Process Clause prohibits states from depriving any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Okay? And the Privileges or Immunities Clause was originally intended to ensure fundamental economic rights for all citizens, including newly freed slaves after the Civil War, by preventing states from abridging these rights. Now, Section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code states that this was allows investors to defer from paying capital gain taxes when exchanging rental properties held for productive use in trade or business or for investment for other like kind real properties. Okay? Basically, meaning that you have a right to make a living. Okay? You have a right to make a living no matter what religious practice that you have. Now, the funny thing is that when the Constitution was made, church and state were considered to be separate. This is a bold-faced lie, as we all know, because any intelligent person knows that when you run for office, what do they put their hand on? A fucking Bible, right? Why not the Wiccan Bible? Why not the Islamic Bible? Why not the Satanic Bible or one of the many Satanic Bibles? Okay, but no, it's always a Christian Bible. It's the same thing with the legal system. You know, why does it say "In God we trust"? Why not "In Satan we trust"? You know, used to be when you go to the ER and you get put in a room that has a crucifix up on top, they would ask you, based off your religion, do you want us to remove this? Now they just don't give a fuck. Literally, they don't give a fuck if it offends you or not. So much for equal rights, right? So, like I said, it's not just in the workforce where you've got to sit there and twist somebody's arm. Like, if you wanted to move up, even as a part time employee, it's based, number one, off your religious preference. It is also based off the fact that to them, giving you a title means they'd actually have to do their job. Okay? Which they don't want to fucking do. They don't want to do their jobs. So when I was working for Dunkin', I was constantly hated by the higher ups because, such as the general manager, the AGMs, and the current shift leaders, because I was a teacher and an educator. You know, all the other employees would come to me and say, "Well, the machine is down. What do we do? How do I get coffee? How do I do this so I can actually make the brew the coffee? Or we don't have the product. How do I do this?" How do I calibrate something? How do we clean this? How do I, you know, it's funny. Like last night, for an example, there was a worker down at Dunkin'. I bring my dogs in there all the time, so they know me down there. And she was messing with the printer. Apparently, it wasn't printing, and she didn't know how to reset it. She didn't know how to turn it off, so I showed it to her. And I said, "Wow, look at this. What does this button do?" Because if it wasn't, the old expression, if it was any closer, it would bitch slap you across the face, right? Because it's literally right in front of the machine, and it's a little white button, a little plastic piece about that big, about yay wide, and you just off, on. So she's got this fucking thing up, and she's looking at it like, where the fuck is the on and off button? you know so obviously with me I had to pick on her a little bit. She's a good friend and good worker and everything, but seriously though, I mean, I used to teach how to do things. Like, I went into this one Dunkin' and I had to tell them how to make hot chocolate and to actually put it in a box of Joe. Furthermore, I had to tell them how to go underneath the computer and show them where to go to get the box of hot chocolate within a box of Joe. They didn't have a fucking clue because they don't teach anymore. They just don't fucking teach. Another furtherance of the American educational process. Nobody wants to teach because they want slaves. They want because if you don't ask questions, no ripples occur. Therefore, no headaches occur, no hiccups in the workplace, right? But if you begin to ask questions, you're the devil. You're the Antichrist. You're an archdevil. You're a demon. And they will do everything they can to limit you. So I put my name in to become a shift leader. And I was told by the current shift lead and the GM at the time that I could never be a shift lead because I was part time. And I said, really? So you're going to violate my rights within the labor board legal system, penal codes? Wow. So you're going to discriminate against people on Social Security. You're going to limit people on their equal rights within a company, which dictates it does not matter if you're part time or full time, you have a right to make a living and move up in the company. This is the state of Maine labor laws right here. Okay, so I had them on like 4 to 6 different labor law violations. And the funny thing is, one of the higher ups, one of the the high people that go around teaching general managers how to be general managers, came in and said he's not wrong. And it's like, shit. When the upper levels come in and actually back you up, that says something. Okay, so I ended up getting. They ended up promoting me to shift lead, morning shift lead and everything, and then they ended up changing district managers, and they ended up changing general managers. I don't know how many fucking times. So I ended up having the title and the numbers for maybe 3 weeks. And by the new year, guess what? I spent a year fighting them. I need these numbers to do my job. I need the title so I can have the numbers to do my fucking job. Well, guess what? I spent a year fighting it. And then I finally looked at the customers and I said, you know what? Start complaining. You want that refund? I can't do that as an acting shift lead. I don't have the numbers to operate the machine. They refuse to give them back to me. They're making nothing but excuses. So either you start making, bad publicity for the company, or I can give you something of equal value for the order that you wanted that we don't have. Wow. Okay. So a lot of times that worked, but guess what? Most of them chose to go under and give a negative review of the company, which should actually light a fire under their asses, but it doesn't. Why? Because it always comes down to my store, my product, my way or the fucking highway. I get my bonus no matter what. Fuck you because you're underneath me. You're a second class citizen, a second class employee. And that's what it comes down to, sadly, in today's corporations. So I was thinking about this because on Facebook and social media platforms, I've been watching a lot of videos and and reading a lot of posts about a lot of things that myself and others have gone through that have come to me and discussed a lot of this stuff. And so I was thinking about it. I even meditated on this, and so I wanted to show this book to you. And this is by Brother Nero, and it's called Satanism, A Beginner's Guide to the Religious Worship of Satan and Demons, Volume 1, Philosophy, and it's by Brother Nero. This book, and the reason I chose this book and is because it was published back in 2010, which was the copyright date. And like I said, the reason why I chose this book is because he talks a lot about the stuff that I just talked about, from who Satan is, what demons are, the fact of the universe, satanic unity and the Antichrist, pacts with Satan and demons, the afterlife, I am a Satanist, the importance of standing up for yourself in Satan, Satanism, family and children, teenage Satanists, Solitary practice versus joining a coven. The lack of honor, loyalty, and respect in the satanic community. Modern Satanism, Anton LaVey in the Satanic Bible, the use of the label reverse Christianity, the importance of keeping a magical journal, books of on Satanism, daily prayer, marriage, sex, and relationships, animal sacrifice. And then you have the appendix, which is holy text of the Yazidis, the Al Jawad, the poem in praising the Sheikh Adi, and the El Jawad commentary. Now, like I said, the reason I chose this book is because I thought he did. I got this book a few years back, and when I read it, it was very powerful. I wish I literally wish I had this book back when I had to deal with my son's mother's mother, family. When I had to deal with CPS and when I had to deal with the bureaucratic bullshit of corporations. I wish I had this book when I dealt with that because it deals with family, dealing with the public, dealing with corporations, dealing with the perception of what a Satanist is and how to deal with it from the questions that come your way. When I said that when I lived in Clarksville, Texas, I told you a little bit what transpired down there, and but I had people like I was sitting there one day, one afternoon. And it was a Sunday afternoon, and I was reading a book. I was just studying. I was studying. It was back when I first came across Alistair Knott, his work, and the Demonic Bible by Turk Suzij. And I was in the process of studying this, and I was kind of working in my BOS at the same time, and just taking notes, my thoughts, and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, I kept hearing somebody like a horn beeping in our dooryard. And it's like, okay, number one, there's a car dealership right across the fucking street from me. Is somebody, we got a road and then a house right over here. Is somebody, just on the side of on the corner there, just honking their fucking horn? Well, eventually I just stuck my head out the out the curtain and saw that somebody was in our dooryard. It was two African American teenagers who were Christians. They were Baptists, and they had heard these rumors, and the rumors that were going around that I was unaware of at the time. And so I went out and I said, "What can I do for you? And why are you on this premises?" Because you don't see people come into a property without a good reason. Like you'll get an HOA representative, or you'll get law enforcement, maybe a salesperson. But to have random teenagers show up and just sit there and honk and honk and honk, it's like, what the fuck do you want? You know? Well, guess what? They started asking questions. Is it true that you do this? Is it true that you are here to do that? And it was rumors that you, number one, the rumors were not only ridiculous, the beliefs of what a Satanist is and what they do was ridiculous. And not mentioning the accusations were ludicrous. Okay. So I answered their questions. And like I said, it was not in the same, the order that you would normally, a normal person would sit there and go, okay, you'd have to be a racist to do this. You you would have to be a complete psychopath to sacrifice children. You would have to start a satanic church before you went into all this other shit. You know what I'm saying? So it just kept getting more and more ludicrous the more they asked questions, and it was very. It became so right up in your face. You know, they had no fucking clue what Satanism was or what to do. And you know living elsewhere in the country, this is shit that you don't have to put up with. Things that you don't have to deal with. And at that point, I didn't even know about the Bible Belt. I never even heard of the Bible Belt. I didn't even know there was a Bible Belt here in the United States until that point. So, like I said, I answered their questions, and I had like three counties rise up against me and my neo-pagan friends at the time, which I'm no longer friends with, by the way. But by the time I left, I had everybody on my corner. Like literally, they were in my corner. They were on my side. They were friends. They let us come in, shop. They wouldn't jack up the prices. They wouldn't, forbid us to come in to order food and stuff like that. And so the only people that were against us, against me and my neo-pagan friends, were the church and the Good Old Boys group, which was basically the county. Somebody threatened to burn down our house on Halloween. So supposedly the cops were parked in an unmarked vehicle in the car dealership across the street. And it's like, really? You do realize that place is lit up, and anybody could see into those vehicles. Wow. Dumbasses, right? Second of all, you had a minivan, and this was an African American man, pull up, yell out a racial slur, and then peel off and go down the side road. And if we're such racists who are there to sacrifice black babies, why was it that an African American family came to our house on Halloween trick or treating? Do you see the hypocrisy here? Do you see the stupidity of cults like this that take place in these areas? Do you see how being a different practitioner is not only looked down upon and limited, but it's like the laws just don't fucking matter to them? So when I got my hands on this book, I sat there, I meditated on each freaking chapter. I contemplated it. And it was like, this is the most genius fucking book I have ever read. Right up until the very end. It was strong the whole way through, except for the very end where he dropped the ball. But still, it was a damn good read and a good educational book for anybody. Not just Satanists. You can be a necromancer, you could be a Wiccan, a pagan, a druid, a shaman. You could be a voodoo zant, you could be into Santeria, Palo Mayumbi, Kimbiza, you can be into, Umbra, or any other fucking religion out there. This book will teach you a lot, and it will open your eyes. So by the time I became a necromancer and I got my hands on the religious rites of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, I started going back through the Constitution. I started learning the Constitution. I can't tell you how many hours I sat at the library just reading these books that you can't check out. I started reading them and I started going through, taking notes, and it was like, holy fuck, I wish I had known this shit back when my family was being discriminated against. I wish I knew this shit when we were being threatened down in Clarksville, Texas. You know? I wish I knew this shit when I worked for Tractor Supply. So when I became a teacher, when I worked for the second owner, when I went back to work for Duncan, I started teaching my employees their religious rights. I wasn't just teaching them the OSHA laws. I wasn't just teaching them the food safety laws. I wasn't just teaching them how to do their job and my job. I also showed them the penal codes of perspectives between the Ramsey law in a religious perspective of jewelry, for an example, and a uniform, and why companies prefer you to use a uniform or a strict uniform code. Like McDonald's or Burger King or Dunkin' Donuts, Tim Hortons even. You know, you have this uniform that you have to wear, and it's to get rid of all this shit, right? Then why is it still there? You know, and then when you look at Howard Zinn's book, for an example, A People's History of the United States, he has this other book called The Other Civil War. And it deals with the people in the BS that you have to deal with. And it's like, you fucking see this shit everywhere. And I mean everywhere. It's not just in the corporate, it's not just in the government, it's not just in religion based societies, it's not just, you know, moving to a location being the Bible Belt or what used to be the Confederacy. Slavery is still going on today. It's just underneath a new facade. It's a new image. It's not just slavery on a cotton field. No, now it's in the workplace where it's my way or the highway. You are going to get paid this amount. You'll get paid when we decide to pay you. I see this. This is in the medical field in some medical locations, and it doesn't matter how many times you report them either to HR, because HR, like I said, is only in it to protect the company, not the employee. But then you get into the school systems where this shit's not supposed to be any form of hindrance. It's an educational system. So why are they not teaching our children? Why are they not teaching our children how to make money? How do they not teach our children to create? Instead, you got things like cancel culture. You've got race wars or race mysticism. You have all this sexual orientation going on where you can't even read a book on Cat in the Hat anymore because it's considered a hate crime. Really? A fucking children's story is considered to be offensive? How about you read the Bible for once? How many people did the Hebrews or Israelites slaughter through their wars in the Old Testament? Human sacrificing, animal sacrificing. How about incest? How about idolatry, where daughters got their father drunk to produce an heir for him? How about sending a man off to war so you can fuck his wife? How about betrayal? How about crucifixion? How about where limiting knowledge is such a fucking crime that was actually the first Reich back during the Roman Empire, where a man that educated his disciples was put to death on a cross. Not only tortured, beaten, made to carry his cross with thorns where blood was running down his eyes. But you shattered his knees and then you stabbed him in the side with a spear. How about a corpse violation? How about a violation of a corpse? You got 10 commandments that you violate on a daily basis. Wow. And then you get to the time of Napoleon, the Second Reich, where the witch wars were going on. You know, how many people throughout Europe in the colonies here in America were murdered because of accusations of being a witch? Because it was seen as devil worship. Where having knowledge of herbalism and being able to heal somebody was now considered to be a crime, a religious and spiritual crime. Okay. How about the Third Reich? Crimes against humanity. World War One, or World War Two, for that matter. You know, I find it interesting. Jim Marrs wrote a good book called The Rise of the Fourth Reich. And in the first chapter, he talks about Adolf Hitler being a military police who was sent undercover to investigate a religious fanatic group, only to become a part of that group, was imprisoned himself, brought out, rejoined that group, was moved up into the Senate, and then he became the Fuhrer. Look at what he did, right? And now you see where the church pays less tax than an average citizen, but yet the rich, such as Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, President Trump, pay a fraction of what the church pays because they've learned how to make money. Interesting how that works, right? But yet, when it comes to teaching our children, they don't teach history anymore. They don't teach the true history. They teach a fraction of the history of what the government tells them that they're allowed to preach. Why? Because it keeps them in power. It keeps the populace submissive. Because where going to school used to be a privilege, now it's mandatory legally by law that your child goes to a educational institute. Wow. And instead of teaching your children and educating them, which is what they're supposed to do, they teach them to be employees. They limit their thinking. They prevent them from being imaginative. I mean, think about this for just a minute. You know, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. There was a kid that wanted to work with with an inventor. He wanted it so fucking bad that he didn't have the money to do so. So what he did was he did what a ironically a friend of mine, somebody that I follow on TikTok, was doing. Was he was train hopping, across America. So this kid, you know, went to New York. He found the corporation and he went in and he says, "Hey, I want to work with you." He was denied. But this is what he did. He didn't go back to them. He didn't go home. He decided to work for him. He got a job, started at the bottom, worked his way to the top. And all of a sudden, he created something. He found the right opportunity to put something forth. And now his name is equal to that inventor. And do you know what he created? phonograph, which is basically a the early form of a telephone. Wow, amazing. 1937. The 1930s is when this occurred. So when I tell you to go into the older books, I'm not joking. You're going to see things not as biased. You're going to see the old way of doing things. And I can see where Grim Hustle recommends these old books. Because just out of 16 books, through the first video that he put out where he recommended 9 books, then 5 books, and then 3 books, and then 1 book, and so forth. And I think he put out like 20 books within 3 to 4 videos. I went out and I got all those books. The last one was Grim Begins. Everything from Stoicism to money, spiritualism to education. And when you think about it, all this stuff that we worry about, fucking, why the fuck do we worry about this shit? Because it's a fad, because we want to fit in or we want to be a part of something. But we don't actually want to do the work. It's called laziness. We're in it for the paycheck. It's not about the education. It's not about making things right. It's about we're in the top 1%. The rest of you can go fuck yourself. Now we got class, we got creed, we got all this other shit that has come down that we have to deal with just to make a fucking living. 60% of our taxes goes to the fucking government. What the fuck does the government do but sit on their ass and fucking bitch about everything? We're going to dictate what the rest of the nation can do. What's the First Amendment say? You know, the Article of Independence says that when a corrupt institution becomes so bad that every avenue has been taken, your duty as a citizen is to separate from that corrupted establishment. Does anybody remember the Boston Tea Party? That kicked off that revolt. And that was after they spent a month going from the colonies to the King's Court and back, empty-handed. And yet, every fucking time, a new tax. Wow. And then when you get somebody like Robert Kiyosaki, everybody hates him. Oh my God, you got jinxed. You got fucking played there, man. Wow. Okay. Well, how come that Robert Kiyosaki's work goes along with Napoleon Hill's work, which came before his time, and what about Marcus Aurelius, a 2nd century Stoic philosopher, who said the exact same thing? So, even if you go into Seneca on the shortness of life, you go into War and Peace, you go into The Art of War, you go into, say for an example, Shantorum, where you're seeing a criminal's life, or how about Crime and Punishment, for an example, where somebody committed murder and then felt bad about it, turned himself in. That's wrong, because according to the state, according to the law and the Constitution, number one, the 4th Amendment says that you don't have to help an officer of the law with their investigation. The 5th Amendment states you have the right to remain silent so you don't, incriminate yourself. So the 14th Amendment, not only do you have a right to make a living, to educate your children, women, according to the 13th Amendment, have a right to control their own body. Wow. And that's according to the 1010-117 Congress Act under A and B. Oh, yes. See, in A, it says that no government agency, including jurisdictional, the judge's territory, has the right to interfere in what a woman does with her body. Second of all, it clearly states that a woman can either conceive a child or terminate a child based off fear and mental health. Wow, really? But people got so bent out of shape when this one act that was put in place, I think it was back in 1976, if I'm not mistaken, Roe versus Wade, was overturned. But they don't stop to think it's no longer the government's responsibility to dictate this. Now it's up to the independent state to dictate what can be legally done with a woman's body. But still, the 1010-117 Congress Act still applies none the fucking less. Which means you can go to court. Well, guess what? A civil suit, it doesn't matter if it's you're being charged for manslaughter or whatever. Guess what? The Constitution's there. They want to get rid of this shit. They want to get rid of knowledge so that you're nothing more than a fucking drone. You know? We live in a time where even a man who gets assassinated on national television, and yeah, I'm talking Charlie Kirk, okay, gets shot, bleeds out, and dies. It's no longer about the fucking crime. Now it's about a Christian revival. Everyone else has to take a backseat to this. Why? Why is Christianity the only ones that can practice their religion in our schools? Why not Satanism? Why not necromancy? Why don't they do their fucking jobs and actually teach? Why is it so hard for people to allow families to live in peace, to raise their children the way they want, without bringing religion into it, without bringing all this other BS into a dispute? The Satanic Temple, is perhaps one of the leading political advisors for Satanism. But they're doing it just for their temple. Just for their temple and their members. That's it. Fuck the rest of Satanism. Fuck the COS. Fuck the joy of Satan. Fuck the traditional, Satanism or the theistic Satanism. To hell with Luciferian Satanism. It's all about their members. They put on a nice show, but if you get their newsletter, it's always, we feel our members' rights are being violated. This is why we're filing these complaints, and we're winning. This is just reverse Christianity of them sitting there going, we're winning, we're winning. The devil has nothing. Our foot is on that serpent's head. Really? What happens when you come up against somebody that has knowledge of the laws, has knowledge of their religious rights? Christians run in fear with their tail between their legs. This book will help you. The knowledge that I put down in the description box will help you. You have the same rights as everybody else. You just have to have a little courage and step outside your comfort zone, build a case, and go and shove it up their asses. It's called freedom of speech for a reason. It's called religious rights. It is called personalized rights to make a living. That is what made America great to begin with. And over the last 40 to 50 years, this country has gone downhill badly. And I mean badly. Both in education, both in a religious format, both in personalized rights. It's across the fucking board. And when it comes to having the same rights for the same amount of health care, the same career opportunities, the same everything across the world, Christians get the first pick of everything. The rest of us, it's a big fuck you. So you know what I say? Fuck you back. I'm going to do me. My family is going to come before you. That's the way I look at it. And that's why I teach my apprentices and guide them the way I do. That is why when I decide to comment on a post on social media, it doesn't matter if it is a lawyer dictating people's constitutional rights. If I see something that that individual has not touched on, I am going to post it. I am going to comment on it. And I'm going to lay it out flat. I'm not going to be nice and I'm not going to be cuddly about it. I'm going to tell it to you raw. If that gets your knicker, if that makes you pucker up, guess what? Once you feel better, you can go to your favorite proctologist and find the oil, the ointment, and apply it where it fucking hurts most. But I'm going to tell it to you straight. I'm not going to corrupt anything, and I'm definitely not going to use watered down propaganda. I'm going to tell it to you straight, and I'm going to give you numerous references. I'm going to give you numerous sources to back it up. I've always said if it doesn't align with history, mythology, folklore, archaeological, don't fucking believe it. Look for those commonalities. Build upon it. If it doesn't align, get rid of it. It's most likely watered down. It's probably something that's there to distract you. Either way, it's not worth your time. You want to grow smarter? Apply yourself. I find it interesting that in the old days, it wasn't a school's responsibility to teach their children. It was the father, it was the mother who was responsible for educating their children to bring them up the right way, the correct way, with values and traditions. The 18th century, it was a privilege to go to school. And now you're legally obligated to have your child in school. Otherwise, the cops are called and CPS is on your ass. Wow. Really? And when one person has a hair across their ass, they're going to cause all this mischief. Wow. And then they wonder why it takes somebody like me to put you in your place. Or somebody that I've taught. Perhaps even an organization like the Satanic Temple. We do the legal way. Yes. But you can't dictate when you've got lost, clearly. And we're in the wrong. Why? Because when you have all this evidence lined up against you, the world can't be wrong. I wonder who'd be the one to be the wrong. Think about that. See, this is why I always tell you, if you're going to preach something, back it up with numerous sources and references, and always make yourself available to the public because you are responsible for the things that you do and say. But you gotta know your rights. I've told you guys this. Jamie Newalk, welcome. Carlson Elwad, welcome. Libby Wa, interesting last name. I'm guessing that's your last name. Maybe made up last name. I don't know. Brother Leo Blandford, welcome. XX Westworld XX Official, welcome. Exactly. You know, Leo, on that point there, the lack of education to earn money. I was looking at Robert Kiyosaki's book this afternoon. It was called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was kind of just scrolling through it, and I also went through his book on the capitalist book, and I also went through, I believe it's called A, B, and C um, book, and in the A, B, and C book, there was a portion in there that talked about education. Who needs an MBA? Who needs an MBA? Because if you and you know, and it caught me funny because I couldn't help but snicker at it. Who needs an MBA? Why get an MBA? Don't even bother going for it, he says, right? Well, I was thinking back at something that Sylvester Stallone said in a commercial that was on YouTube. And the way he put it was, who needs a diploma? Who needs a college degree? All that is it tells an employer that you showed up for a number of years, you completed a number of texts and tasks and stuff like that, and it shows that you're dependable and reliable and won't fuck up that person's corporation. And when you think about it, that's fucking true. That is freaking true. Think about it. It's not about studying hard. It's not about getting good grades so that you'd be able to get a good job. How do you get a good job? You work your ass off, right? So how do you work your ass off? You go out, you go to get a job. Just out of an example, most jobs today require you to have 2 to 4 years of experience. Well, if somebody went through high school, went into college, and they've never worked a day in their life, how do you expect them to get the experience in that field, like say carpentry or construction? How about the medical field? If they want to come in as a X-ray tech, for an example, how do you expect them to have 2 to 5 years experience in the field if you don't give them the opportunity to gain experience? Think about this. This is why corporations are created. They create jobs for the community. If you open up a business, what does that do for the community? Number one, it brings product to that community. It becomes a part of that community structure, yes, but it brings revenue to that area. More so, it opens up career opportunities for the public, right? Exactly. It's a catch 22. So, if you don't give somebody the opportunity to move up in a corporation, you're keeping them down. But yet, you're going to bring in a registered pedophile, make him a general manager. They may no longer be on the registry, but they're there. You have somebody that was a drug addict stealing money and funds from the corporation, and yet you're going to terminate shift leaders. You're going to terminate a general manager for the employee that you hired. And then a month or two later, after all these people have left or have been terminated, I should say, you're going to quit your job and suddenly have enough money to open up your own business. Wow. Now, one of two things happened. You either got one hell of a fucking major loan from a bank, or that money that supposedly disappeared, you swindled and blamed others for. Interesting how that works, right? Second of all, how does giving somebody shift lead numbers or a title hurt a company? It doesn't. It's like when you become a father or you become a mother. You can be a single father or a single mother in the world. The jobs are mandated federally, not just state, legally, to work within your boundaries so that you're there for your children. Especially if you're a single parent. There are programs that you can sign up for to have, say, for an example, a babysitter for that child after school. Programs like, say, track, basketball, after school programs, karate lessons at the local Y. They have buses that will take these kids to those locations so that your children can have some place to go until you get out of work and can go pick them up. Or you have a family members that can go pick them up for you if you are unable to, and watch them. This is why it's called a support system. So I look back at when my son was born, and his grandmother, decided to use her position as a counselor to attack her daughter, our son, and then finally me, because she didn't fucking like me because of my religion. You know, that fucking pisses me off. It really does. It's ignorant. It's corruption, and it should be blotted out. You know, you got all this talk about blotting out corruption within the governments, agencies. Oh, we're finding billions and billions and billions of money. We're saving billions and billions of money here, there, wherever. Elon Musk supposedly went in and found all this fucking money that was like trillions of dollars saved. Well, if it was trillions of dollars saved, then this nation, number one, would be out of debt. Second of all, where is this $2,000 to $4,000 check that we're all supposed to get? You know, this is just more fucking lies being told. This is why I like the pamphlet 1440, because it shows you the lies of the media. It shows you the lies of the newspapers. It shows you the lies of the government. And once you've read it, it just opens your eyes up to all these lies and these corruptions and shit. And it's like, fuck, man. No wonder I don't watch TV anymore. No wonder I don't even watch, these ads and shit on social media. You know, I just stick to books, and I raise my son. Like the other day, my son stayed over, and I took him over. I had him dress up, and we went over to the park. We had just had a snowstorm, so he got to play in the snow. He went down, the slide, warp speed, or I should say trans warp speed, if you want to be a geek from Star Trek. And yes, I happen to be a fan of Star Trek. The original with Kirk. And then you got DS9 and Voyager. I wasn't really a big fan of the Next Generation. Enterprise was okay though, but that was an interesting turn of event. Strange New Worlds is pretty cool, Pike. But here it is. So I mean, we put snow on the slide, and he went down. He loved it. We had a freaking grand old time. But then we came over, and he wanted to help me out. He wanted to help with the dishes. He wanted to play video games. He wanted to play, to draw, and he'd confer with me. Hey, what do you think about this drawing, Dad? And I'm thinking to myself, Napoleon Hill, creativity. How to think and grow rich. What is this richness? What does it mean to think about things? What does it mean to create? If people didn't create, think about how to communicate, we wouldn't have the telephone. If if people didn't think on how to create things, then we wouldn't have the CAT scan machine. We wouldn't have that recording device that medical professionals use. We wouldn't have computers like the smartphones here that has that little button to voice activations, and we wouldn't have biometrics and all that shit. So thinking before is creating, right? So observation is something that is very much needed, and So I was thinking about this when I was, with my son, because um, this is a kid that has come to me and he wanted me to teach him how to write in cursive. School isn't doing that. They used to enforce writing in cursive, especially around the third grade, and he's in third grade right now, and they're not even teaching that no more. They threw that out the fucking window. You know, then he wanted to learn alchemy or chemistry, I should say, in modern term, lingo. So I started teaching him how to do things with certain things that you have in the kitchen, like herbs and stuff, like say salt and vinegar and baking soda. Take an Altoid and put it into a Coca-Cola. You know, I sat there and I poured bottles of Coca-Cola into the back of the toilet, and I put Altoids in the bowl and taped it all up. Fucking awesome. I was like, go ahead and pull that fucking, flush it. And I mean, the reaction of it, he got so excited. He's like, dude, that is awesome, bro. And it's like, where the fuck are you getting this lingo from? And then I found out, oh, it's from this show called Unspeakable. These $20 fucking markers that he wants. And it's like, why get these, 8 markers for, 25 $30 when I can go over to the Dollar Tree and get 30 of them for like $5, you know. But again, unspeakable, right? So you look at the creativity and you look at what your child is into. You look at how your family has these traditions and these values. So my son's mother, she was brought up to believing in with certain values and certain traditions, right? And then I was brought up with certain traditions and values, and doing, the right thing. And no matter what I do, as long as I was happy, my mother didn't care. So these are the things I try to instill in my son, and I always try to instill honesty in him, because, and he cops up to the things he did. Like, my mother took my laundry out the other day, and the day before yesterday, and to do the laundry for me because I had all his stuff and she wanted to do it. So I was like, okay. So I gave her the laundry bin, everything. I gave her back her Tupperware and stuff like that. And she was telling me today, when she dropped off the laundry, she says, your son did that to your laundry bin. There's a piece of it broken off on the handle, and he said, what happened to us? I don't know, he says, but he goes, I did it by accident. I think I broke it. So that honesty is there. So I mean, I'm doing an awesome job teaching him, right from wrong and being honest, but I'm teaching him. He's very curious about religion and the various religion stuff, and he's always asking me about it. And my son's mother, don't get me wrong, she's a Baptist, will always have those traditions and values, being a part of her. But she does not want him to have anything to do with what I do. And I try to respect that to a point, but, when a child asks, you you tend to water it down a little bit, but kind of just, you got to water it down just so that they can understand it, especially as an 8-year old, you know? So you're sitting here teaching them, well, this religion teaches this religion teaches that. So you can see where your mama is coming from with her religion. But all of this stuff goes back to this. Okay. And and then you go to the legal system. So you're teaching them to work with cops, but to be on guard about their tactics and their tricks, because a lot of times you want them to come when you need them, but at the same time you got to protect your rights, you got to protect your home and stuff like that. So there's a lot of a catch-22, as Leo here put it, that's involved in that. But still, it's an honor to see, when your kid comes to you and says, Dad, Mom, can you teach me this? Like my son's mother, she's a genius when it comes to technology. I have the bare minimal of knowledge when it comes to this stuff. I know how to log into a site like YouTube and start a YouTube video. But when it comes to getting these fancy, beginning proverbs, depictions and stuff like, say, D.H. Thorne has, or let's go with Frank Castle from Serpent of the Grails, or how about Bokor Leonard Elmera with the things that he does on his channel, or how about Bophemet X and how he cuts and does all this video type stuff. I can go out and get this stuff for dummies, and I still have a hard time understanding it. So when my son brings home this what they call homework, you know, I have to go to her and go, you need to sit down and I'll send her photos of the math homework and go, you know, you deal with this, you know, because it's like, I don't get it, you know. And when it comes down to technology, I'll send her a photo of what's going on with the technology because, my son's trying to get onto his Xbox, my Xbox, and he can't deal with it. But because we can't get past the password that she set up and she's refusing to give it. So I finally figured out how to reset the entire box so that I could set up a new password. And now every time he comes to me and goes, "Hey, Dad, can you do this?" So it's like, okay, here you go. Go play, buddy. You want to play, Dad? So not today, buddy. Maybe today. You know? So, I mean, I'll help him out every so often with video games and stuff like that. But for the most part, he wants just to be with me because I take him out places. I take him to the park. We do, father son stuff. I help him with this cool stuff like alchemy and writing in cursive, and we'll have a drawing contest. We'll play games together, and all this stuff. This is part of being a parent. It's a parent's job to educate the children. It's always been that way, you know? So why do you have to make it legally obligating to go to a educational institution? Oh, that's right, because it's all about money. Money, money, money. It's about control. It's about slavehood. So again, you're seeing all this stuff. And I think about what Brother Nero put in this book, and I think about what I have to deal with as a single father. Even though my son goes between his mom's house, my house, and my mother's house, and when he's able to, because his mother goes out to her parents' house, you know, they talk shit about me apparently. And from what I understand from my son is her mother talks shit about me, but her dad likes me. And it's like it's kind of ironic since I've never met her father, number one. Number two, the very few encounters I've had with her mother, it's been one sided because she's been using her expertise for personal gain, and I've just been defeating her left and right, putting her in her place, so to speak, when she's doing things wrong. But I'm not going to sit there and say you can't see your grandchild. I want my son to know both his grandparents. I want him to be able to make his own choices to a point, but I'm not going to deal with that disrespect. You know what I'm saying? So that's why Brother Nero's work is important. I wish he would write another book, but I don't even know if he's still a practicing Satanist. I don't even know if he's still even around, alive even. I really don't because I lost track of him. I was friends with him on Facebook for a short time, and then his profile disappeared. And like I said, I don't know if he's still around. I wish he would write another book. I wish, I would love to know what made him write this book to begin with. What kind of experiences he had to go through to get to that point where I'm done with this shit. I'm writing this book to lay it out for those that are also having this issue, from work, equal rights within the medical field, or health benefits, to financial gains, to family rights, and so forth. You know, I would love to have to sit down with him and just say, hey, how did this come out, come to be? But you can't do that now because you have no idea if he's still alive. You have no idea if he's planning on writing another book. But now that I'm a practicing necromancer, full time, it's, I'm more busy doing rituals and bettering myself, and, just having family time, I retired 12 months ago. Man, I can't believe it's been 12 months already. Just 12 fucking months. I invest. I'm investing. You know, I've got, money coming in, so I don't have to work. I'm in a place where I pay, you know, small amount of rent, because it's low income federal income based housing, because it's just me here with my cats. My son comes and goes as he pleases, like I said. So I really don't need much. I'm within a 10-minute walk of restaurants, stores, you know, bars, if I want to go out drinking, if I want to go to nightclubs. I've got, what is it? One, two, three nightclubs around within a 10-mile walk, a 10-minute walk rather. About 15 bars, several stores, within a 10-minute walk. My son's school's within about a 20-minute walk, 10, about a 15, 20-minute walk from where I live. So I mean, hell, I don't even have to drive during the summer. I can just walk over and get him. And I mean, he loves to walk. So I'll carry the backpack. He just walks. But we talk about everything. Like, why is the grass grow? Why do people do this or that? What do you think about this? He'll ask, and it's like I just answer him. I do the best I can. You know, each year it's a whole new challenge. It's a whole new perspective that comes to the tables, and you actually have to sit there and go, okay. Then you got one teacher will teach you, hey, go to this link and it's today's lessons. And it's like, where the fuck was this last year? Why doesn't anybody else inform the parents on this stuff? They don't, because that would mean they'd actually have to do their jobs. And most of the teachers today just want to get paid, and that's it. It's all about the money. That's all it is. Who has it, who's got it, and who doesn't. So it doesn't matter if you're studying to be an employee, if you're trying to open up a small business, if you're going for big business, or if you're just becoming an investor, or just wanting to be the best parent that you can be. You got to know your rights. So like I said, if you like what I do, if you like my content, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Feel free to hit that notification button so you don't miss the next time I'm on. But like I said, I wanted to do a personalized video on legal rights. I wanted to show you that this stuff does happen. This is my own personal experiences, but also things that I've witnessed, things that people have told me, things that, you know, I do have some proof on. I set up an entire Facebook group for my friend that passed away, years ago. The one that was from Virginia that I told you about, that died of the brain aneurysm because she had something going on with the brain that she needed surgery for, but she didn't have the HMO wouldn't pay for it. The local healthcare system refused to do anything because she was a Satanist in a Christianized society. And it was just like, it's just getting worse and worse out there, ladies and gentlemen. So I made a group honoring her, and I put everything from our conversations in there, and other people that interacted with her, they got in there and posted their interactions and everything and stuff. So I mean, it's there. So Just to fill you in, FYI, yes, it is there. And just be the best parent that you can be the best employee you can be, better yourself for you, not for somebody else, because nobody else is going to look out for your education. No one's going to look out for your rights but you. I can guide you like a horse to water, but I can't make you drink from that well, or that trough. Only you can decide to do that for yourself. That's why this is an educational channel. That's why I do what I do as a multi faith archbishop. That's why I teach you as a practitioner from various different perspectives. So I hope it's been educational. I hope it's been enlightening for you. And like I said, always back up what you preach and always make yourself available to the public. All right? So have a good day wherever you are in the world. Have a good night wherever you are in the world. And until next time, I'm out.